Okay, and then I'll do the Facebook thing in a minute. So, Haribol Gurudev, so how are things, and is there anything you'd like to share before the questions?
Everything's good, all things considered, and well, this week Chitahari arrived yesterday, day before yesterday, and so we've got a lot for him to do here. He's excited about that, so are we. And Bhai Krishna will be returning from visiting his parents in a couple of days, so we'll have a full staff here, and it's good because there's always a lot to do. Interesting development related to the ashram came up, and I don't know exactly where it's going to go, but some time ago, we tried to work with a dairyman up north of us to produce ahimsa milk and ultra pasteurization, where we could ship it all over the country to serve the whole community of devotees, should they so desire. And we went through the numbers with him and whatnot, and all. And it didn't work out that we could proceed with it. But the day before yesterday, an acquaintance of his, a younger man, called me, and he is raised in a dairy family up in Oregon, and he's relocating in California, south of Silicon Valley, in between really Silicon Valley and Los Angeles. And so the dairyman whom we had been talking with had spoken to him about our ideas and so forth. And so he contacted me, and he wants to set up a ahimsa dairy in that area on 120 acres. And so I'm going to try to connect all the temples in California, ISKCON temples, really, to that facility. It's going to open in September. We'll see if it works out. It's going to work out for him. He's going to do it, but whether I can get the temples to sign on and so forth and purchase milk from him, he'll deliver it. We'll see, but I'm optimistic about that. So that's interesting. It's something I'm always interested in, and see if we can help to provide that kind of service. So that was an interesting development. Otherwise, things are busy here, and I'm busy writing, going through Vrindaranya's editorial suggestions on my book on the one hand, and preparing chapters further along on the book for Sanskrit editing before they go to her. So it's all in process, and that's good. But with that, why don't we go ahead and take this questions this morning?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so now there's 5. Yeah, so Kishore, do you want to ask your question?
Haribol Guru Maharaj, can you hear me?
I can. Good morning.
Good morning.
Jai Madhuvan.
Jai. Jayodhari. I was reading the Shikshastakam, your Shikshastakam, and in the verse on Nadanam Nagyanam, towards the end, you write...
Not Janam.
Janam, not Sundarim. Towards the end of the verse, you write how in the stage of Ruchi, there's a sense, you're drawing from Jiva Goswami, that there's a sense that one feels Krishna is accepting one's internal service. And in connection to this, I'm wondering if that, because that was kind of in relation to Smarnam, I'm wondering how that same principle would apply to other angas of bhakti, like japa or kirtan, physical service, and if that same sense of Krishna accepting one's service would apply correspondingly or arise correspondingly, or if one sense of acceptance may come in one before another. And then kind of the second part of the question would be, how much could that sense of acceptance be distinguished from taste?
I think it's probably in reference to how the verse that you're referring to is also referred to in the first verse of Shikshastakam. The other 7 verses are referred to successively by different terms. So Shreya Kairava Chandrika Vataranam. It's poetically described like moonbeams, soothing, cooling. The fire of samsara has more or less been extinguished. There may be some smoke, but the fire's out. And the soothing, palpable reciprocation from the other side, from the Paravyam, is prominent in the devotee's practicing life. And of course, prior to that stage, for the most part, one's practices have been external practices. And that is because without sufficient cleansing of the heart, it's difficult to do internal practice. Smaranam, for example, requires some purity of heart. Kirtan, in contrast, does not. The inner sense, feeling of reciprocation, I don't think we really are distinguishing that from the taste itself, that the stage is named ruchi. It means taste. And the taste and the reciprocation that we're speaking of is not just relative to smaranam. I mean, after all, kirtan fosters smaranam. So the taste is in the different practice. Of course, there's a couple different stages in ruchi where the taste is stronger or weaker. In the weaker sense, it's dependent upon other things in order for it to be tastable. Kirtan, for example, might be dependent upon being somewhat, at least musically, on key, let's say. Whereas in the latter stages of ruchi, that's not an issue. Even if it's chanted out of key, the sadhaka can derive tastes. So it's not just relative to smaranam. These in Rag Bhakti, in our school, of course, the external practices lead to a very specific and precise internal life, a taste for which is beginning at this stage. So I don't think you want, number one, just want to distinguish the reciprocation I'm talking about from the taste itself. And number two, that reciprocation and that taste to be present in all the angas of bhakti that one is accepting at that time. And some may favor one anga over another. And again, in that stage, one is more qualified for Smarnam. Smarnam can be done prior to that as well, but the full sense of it will not be something that one can practice. What I mean by that is that you can't really practice samadhi, for example. So some of the higher stages, you can't. They're not something to practice. They're more a result of practice that then becomes a natural affair and constitutes a practice in and of itself going forward. But this is for the higher stages of bhakti, and the beginning of that we can connect with the stage of ruchi. So I hope that answers your question. What else?
Thank you, Gurmat.
Yes, you're welcome.
Padmanabha Swami has a question from some of the Spanish-speaking devotees.
Yes, good morning. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if everybody could hear I guess everybody could hear the question, huh? Or no, do I need to repeat it? No. So the question is about female figures in the sacred texts who sometimes appear to be abandoned by divinities. Sita Devi was given as an example, or the gopis of Vrindavan, and how in a feminist environment, or from a feminist perspective, we can explain that to those who, steeped in that perspective, take exception to such and look at it as kind of a mistreatment of women, something to that effect, is the question. Well, I think these are, of course, we're talking about Leela here, in case of the gopis, Sita, and so forth, and that's a concept that that needs to be explained very, very clearly. And in order to explain the concept of Leela, one has to clearly explain the concept of the Atma and its conditioned nature, which causes it to identify as man or woman and so forth. So you have to kind of go back to the basics, the tattva that underlies the Leela, to understand it properly. These are the stories of the Bhagavatam or the Mahabharata, the Ramayana. There's a number of levels on which they can be understood, and they can be looked at in a very superficial way in terms of advice for human society, how to function in the world, and so on and so forth. And when you look at it like that, it's somewhat relative to the cultural times in which the story is told, the book is written, and so forth. And so from that vantage point, there may be some questionable issues that arise in terms of modern culture, societal norms, and so forth and so on, that have formed around really different people. Environmentally speaking, we're influenced by our environment, and have very different sensibilities in an industrial age, for example, as opposed to an agrarian society, and just to give one example, and so forth. So while moral principles apply, and there is a real right and a real wrong, what exactly is the right and wrong in any given circumstance is subject to taking into consideration the time, the circumstances, and so forth. So there are moral principles, and then there are more moral details or laws that could change, or ethical sensibilities, and so on and so forth. So even on the superficial level, the texts you have to enter into the culture of the time and look at it in light of that, and so on and so forth. But then if you look at it at a deeper level, the deepest level in terms of rasa, then there's much more explanation that has to be given in order for persons to understand properly and not make the error of faulting Ram, faulting Krishna. But that said, let's see the example of Sita aside for the moment. Yes, the gopis are pining and for Krishna to return, but so are the gopas. So are the elderly gopis and the elderly gopas, all the people of Vrindavan. It's not just the gopis. It's said by Shelley, an English poet, that I'm going to just paraphrase him. Sweetest tales are those that tell of saddest times. So there's a sweetness in the sadness, if you will, in the separation. And of course, love and separation is a very deep subject from a rasic point of view. And without lots of background and whatnot, or at least letting such an audience with a feminist perspective know that there's a lot of depth to it, that you have to kind of take them through, then they may misjudge such texts and dismiss them altogether, and so on and so forth. That problem's there. So it's an art on the part of the one who's doing the teaching to, on the one hand, bring people into the times and the culture and look at the moral and ethical sensibilities and the social norms of the time, and why they made sense at the time, but might not necessarily make sense if we were just to employ them now. I mean, there was a monarchy, here we have a democracy. I mean, these things are worlds apart culturally and so forth. And there's a philosophical term, presentism, which is the fault of judging acts performed in times gone by in different cultures entirely by present standards in a different time and culture. So you might, invoke that philosophical term and bring it up, and the idea then is we have to enter into the culture of the time and see how it made sense for the people and so forth. And for that matter, there's no one who's more glorious from the Bhagavatam's perspective than the gopis themselves. I mean, the whole book is about the glory of the gopis' love. And for that matter, in Dwarka, the queen's love is underscored, and certainly Sita's love for Ram in Ram Leela as well. And then the whole, I think there should be an emphasis on the virtues of sacrificing. So those who are given the opportunity to sacrifice, like Sita is sacrificing, the gopis are sacrificing, they hold the highest position. The givers hold the highest position. So what's being, it may seem unpalatable that Sita was, for example, was that Ram left Sita, but she was then a vessel of sacrifice that his moral character and position of leadership would be unquestioned, even though the questions weren't warranted. The questions that brought about his separating from Sita, still for Dharma's sake. In other words, he was a leader, and in a superficial sense, or from an ethical point of view, moral point of view, his character was exemplary, and that was a standard of leadership, exemplary moral character. And if his moral character was brought into question, then so much would be at stake. And so in order that it not be in question at all, then Sita took the burden of that, in a sense. That's her glory. That's the greatness of Sita. That's even just from a dharmic a point of view. Nowadays, in today's culture, well, political leadership is characterized by questionable moral standards. That's become the norm, and see how debilitating that is for the society and so forth. So in a society where that's held high, and even when the question of the leader's morality is, and this is an extreme, the extreme case is being made here, that Ram was perfectly upright and dharmic in all respects, but it was like a rumor was spread that wasn't true or something like that. You could just dismiss it because it wasn't true, but he said, all right, let's just assume if you think that it's true, then we'll resolve it in this way. And Sita was the person who took the burden of that sacrifice. And again, those in a worldview where where the aim of life, the goal of life is, in sum, is more than this world. And that more is approached through sacrifice, through giving. Then those who heroes and those who are the heroes and the heroines are the ones that are doing the giving, taking the sacrifice. Radharani is the sacrificing, side of the divine equation of Radha and Krishna. That is our worshipable deity. We worship Radha and Krishna. Krishna is the enjoying side, Radha is the sacrificing side. The word swaha in sacrifice, we employ it in the Gopal mantra. It is fully, that concept is fully embodied in Srimati Radharani. So that understood, what the texts are doing is giving them the highest, her, for example, the highest position, the gopis, the highest position, the position to be followed, the sacrificing side of life. So those are some thoughts on how you could try to bring them into what's really being said in the book. They're meant to be read with good guidance. Otherwise, easy to misunderstand as a story that's outdated and is by contemporary standards, say, for example, in this instance, just sexist, throw it out. No. What else?
Ananta Govinda has a follow-up question. Do you want to read that, or should I read it?
You want to read it?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so they say, for me, the one thing that never connected well in the narrative of the pastime of wait, did I read that right? For me, the one thing that never connected well in the narrative of the pastime of abandonment. We hear how everyone in the kingdom had so much love and affection for the divine couple. How does it balance out in Ram's reasoning? One person doubting versus the majority that had no doubts. Why make a decision in favor of few and non-devotees?
I think I've answered that in the answer already. But let me look.
I just wanted to ask, I was just thinking.
That's a question. I can't hear you, Ananta Govinda. You're speaking, but I can't hear you. If you wanted to further explain.
I did unmute myself, so I'm not sure.
Do you have English and mute original audio? Maybe try that.
English. Mute original audio. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I always wanted, it was a big question of this particular pastime for many years that I was trying to resolve in my head. I'm glad this topic came up. So I was just curious, it seems like there was only a few people that were doubting, this whole situation, and the majority worried how they had so much love and affection for Lord Ram and Sita. So it seems like in the name of Dharma, Lord Ram has to abandon disregard.
Yeah, but that's right. But that's Leela. What's one aspect of the Leela of Ram that it's so dharmic to the extreme that this person can't be an ordinary human being. Nobody could be so dharmic. So the measure, just like the measure of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's sannyas, makes it clear, like to other sannyasis who are older and senior, and who's being older, their senses were easier to bring under control, arguably, because they didn't function as well. He was a 25-year-old lad, and his measure of renunciation would frighten them. So the opulence one of which is the dream of Ram, if a proper understanding of seeing that, having in the text, is that, well, he's obviously divine, and this is an aspect of his lila. This is just a prakat lila, one lila he manifests in this world, and in the context of that, among other things, he's establishing the importance of dharma, which is, characteristically what the avatar is supposed to do. Krishna did to some extent also outside of Braj. Mahaprabhu, going back to Gaur Lila, told Vishnu Priya, in this Lila, we are meant to cry for the jivas. That's what we're supposed to do in this Lila. So for that purpose, I'm leaving you. I'm taking sannyas. So again, she's sacrificing, and he's sacrificing also for the jivas. Now, what about your question? What about all the Nitya citizens in Navadvip or in Ayodhya and their love for Raman? Why, for the sake of dharma, or for the sake of ordinary people, should all these eternal associates have to suffer from a Leela point of view in separation, right, from the divine couple? Isn't that higher than? Yeah. But that's the Leela, and that's the nature then of the eternal associates of the Sarup Shakti. They're gracious. And without that, we wouldn't be involved at all. So during the Prakat Leela, that's an aspect of any Prakat Leela, that there's going to be some distribution, some attention is going to be given to sadhakas, and through sadhakas, new people will join, and so on and so forth. So,
but can it also give a message about
and before you ask that, and further, of course, separation, as I said, that's a very high affair, so that should be understood properly. It's extraordinarily ecstatic aspect of divine love. So we look at it as undesirable, but the measure of intensity that it brings about in love is such that, for example, Sanatana Goswami in Bhagavatamrita extols separation over union. He disagrees with the idea, which is the more common idea among some acharyas, that the purpose of separation is to foster union. He appears to think that separation in itself exceeds the virtue and the ecstasy and the union that can be found overtly in union. So again, I just mentioned that. I didn't go into it in detail in my previous answer, but it's a big and very esoteric topic. So it looks bad for the residents of Ayodhya who like Sita and Ram together, right? And for the sake of some guy who doesn't even know what he's talking about, criticizing Ram, we're going to separate the two. Separation sounds bad, but it's not bad. So it's the only separation, well, outside of the kidnapping is there. I guess that's a big aspect of separation as well that occurs in the union, but it's not one that the inhabitants of Ayodhya, all the devotees of Sita and Ram, can participate in, really. They're in the kingdom, he's in the forest. So
I guess I just never felt that in the story of Sita and Ram, there was not enough of this dharmic justification. Like a Lord Chaitanya's Leela, okay, he takes sannyas, that's dharmic, that's understood. In Krishna Leela, he needs to go to Mathura and fight the demon because the request of the king was there. But in Sita and Ram's, it seems like it's a little bit of a whimsical decision of Ram. He wasn't really under such a big social pressure to do such a thing. So that's why I always felt that, I don't know, I couldn't understand the motivation fully there. But thanks for explaining.
Well, yeah, I mean, he felt under social pressure as a leader that a leader should be impeccable and beyond any doubt, any question. If there's any doubt or any question, even if it's unwarranted, we'll go to extremes to make sure that it doesn't get any credence. It doesn't get any, and it's not nourished and so forth. Look at the way Chaitanya Mahaprabhu dealt with sannyas in the chastisement of Chota Haridas. We find that's that warranted. We don't feel that it is, right? Chota Haridas' offense was hardly such, but Mahaprabhu treated it that. Of course, there's another side to it, and Chota Haridas has attained a very desirable position. So, all right, what else? Yeah.
So Mahara wrote her question out in the chat. So I will read it.
Okay.
So she says, I was listening to a talk on the Vraj pastimes. Sridham was mentioned as not returning to the apricot pastimes with Krishna and instead slept a few thousand years in a cave. When Lord Nityananda came to perform his pastimes, he called Sridham to wake up. He missed him very much. Sridham became Ram Das Abhiram Thakur. Do you know anything about this?
Yeah, each of the different associates of Krishna, like the daughters of Gopals, they have persons in their lineages that have written stories about them in order to emphasize their position and so forth, and those are stories attached to Sridham, and I mean they can be read and something can be drawn from them, but that I have read that. Forget the name of the text. But I'm not sure what the question is. I mean, I don't have anything more to say about it than what's there in the text, and as I have said, those who have penned such texts are going to take some poetic license, and in all those types of hagiographical accounts are political, in the sense that there's a certain something that they want to emphasize. So they tell a story in such a way as to emphasize a certain point, and perhaps above and beyond anything else, the extraordinary glory of that person that they're writing about, whether it be Advaita in those type of texts about Advaita or about Nityananda or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sridham, and other gopas. I mean, the story is it's kind of like giving kind of like a Puranic context or something like that. But I don't think that it's interesting. If you can draw some inspiration from it, good. Otherwise, there are probably more important texts.
Thank you.
Okay. I mean, it's a way of saying that Sridham is important, and Abhiram Thakur is important, and tells a story in order to make that point, and it's kind of like based on a true story. There's some veracity to it, but it's extended in ways that sometimes make you scratch your head. Okay, what else?
Sorry. Padmanabha Swami has another question from the Spanish speaking side.
Okay. So the question is about Jagannath Mishra and Sachi Devi, and the fact that before the birth of Vishvarup and Vishvambar, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's older brother and himself, several of their children were miscarriages or died at birth, something to that effect, which was more common in those days. And whether or not Jagannath Mishra and Sachi Devi are to be connected in Krishna Lila with Vasudeva and Devaki, whose children were also killed by Kamsa prior to the birth of Balaram and Krishna, or to Nanda and Yasoda. And if, I guess the implication of the question is, if to Nanda and Yasoda, what's the connection with the children that died because Nanda and Yasoda didn't have that experience? Well, the answer to the question is, first of all, that I've never seen any Acharya comment on that and make the connection, if you will, between Vasudeva and Devaki and the children of Devaki that were slain by Kamsa. So, as to whether they are Vasudeva and Devaki or Nanda and Yasoda, I believe that different saints and writers have identified them at different times with both, but more so, I would say that the identification is with Nanda and Yasoda. I would say this, it's a little off the topic that you're asking about, but somewhat related. And that is that, of course, Jagannath Mishra passed away prior to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's taking sannyas. And in Krishna Lila, Nanda Maharaj is the one who gave permission to Krishna to go to Mathura. And as such, he had to try to pacify his wife, Yashoda, Krishna's mother, and others to whatever extent he could. And off they went with Akrura. And he promised to bring them back, Krishna and Balaram, just very shortly. They were just going for an event and would return the day after or so. Of course, that didn't happen. Kamsa was slain. Krishna felt he had to stay on in Mathura to deal with Jarasandha and so forth, and he sent letters back, and Nanda Maharaj had to bear the news and so forth. And in Krishna Lila, or in Gaur Lila, as I say, looking at Jagannath Mishra as Nanda Maharaj, he left the world early. And I look at it in this way, that he couldn't bear to participate in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Krishna himself and in Nadia in his sannyas, which corresponds with Krishna leaving Vrindavan and going to Mathura. Krishna leaves Vrindavan and goes to Mathura. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu leaves Navadvip and goes to Kasi and takes sannyas, and then he goes to Puri, right? So he left Sachi, Yashoda, with the burden, who had to deal with it, right? After Mahaprabhu took sannyas, he was brought to Dvaita's house, and the whole decision of how to proceed, given the feelings of the residents of Navadvip and of Mahaprabhu himself, the love they had for one another, and how he in madness had taken sannyas, and there was dharma and etiquette attached to that. And so she had to make the decision what to do and decided that he'd go to Puri and so forth. So Jagannath's Mishra dropped out. He could, Nanda Maharaj couldn't do it again, so to speak. He put it in Yasoda's hands. So I look at it in that way. But as regards the death of the children, prior to Vishwambar and Vishwarup, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his older brother, I've never seen anyone make that that connection. So I would hesitate to do so myself as well. What else?
Indra?
Yeah, Hare Krishna Maharaj, Hare Krishna, dear devotees. I just wanted to say it's really nice to be in this call. And so recently I listened to one of your lectures, and you're saying something like what makes people special is, not only the ability to reason, but the ability to love. And so the question kind of comes up like, do animals love? And like, does the mother cow love the baby calf? And then maybe you can also talk about this, maybe more about like, like they're like, special animals in like Bauma Vrindavan, and do they love Krishna? I'm just wondering about this kind of topic. And I'm sorry if you already answered it somewhere else, but maybe you can say something. Thank you.
Yes. First of all, it's apparent nowadays from a modern and scientific perspective that animals have feelings and emotions, which is kind of like a revelation, if you will. And it's relevant to where they stand on the food chain or in terms of complexity. So humans are the most complex species on Earth, and there are some less complex species that nonetheless have some form of self-awareness and in feeling, emotion, and so forth. And the further down you go on the ladder of complexity, well, the less that's going to manifest. But they're finding that, which is something that is accepted in the sacred texts of the Hindus for since forever. So, first part of your question is yes, to some extent, but given the complexity of the humans, then the prospect for loving and expressing love is greater for that vessel, for that particular form of life. When we go from here to the second part of your question with regard to rasa and the Braja Leela and so forth. So let's take the cows, for example, or the monkeys, but right in Vrindavan, your question is, do they love Krishna, right? So yes, the cows and all the species, they all love Krishna. And they're all expressions of, partial expressions of one of the primary rasas. When I say partial, what I mean by that is that Vatsalya rasa, for example, parental love. Well, the cows are thought to be in parental love. They give their milk to Krishna. We even find in the Brahma Vimohana Leela that when Krishna took the form of the calves, the cows are more inclined to give their milk to Krishna than they were to their own calves, right? So everyone loves Krishna. Everyone loves one another, and their love for one another fosters their love for Krishna. But that said, with regard to Vatsalya rasa, for example, when we're talking about in relation to the cows, the human form there in the Leela gives fuller vent to or opportunity to express Vatsalya rasa and to experience Vatsalya rasa. And all these ideas of rasa, or all these ideals of rasa, possible attainments, Sakya rasa, Madhurya rasa, Vatsalya rasa, coming to us from that side through sadhu sangha, through sampradayas and so forth, is all addressed to human beings who are sadhakas, with the goal that they can attain a human-like status and fully express these types of love in relation to Krishna. But that means that the sadhakas in this world are not becoming cows. If they're pursuing Vatsalya rasa. They're not becoming trees, they're not becoming monkeys, but those are all features, nonetheless, of the Leela. Can you all hear me? Yes, you can hear me still. And they're manifest by the Swarup Shakti. So part of the whole environment, if you will. So yes, they all love Krishna. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. And I was just wondering about like Bauma Vrindavan, like, I mean, Vrindavan is Vrindavan, but still like, it's said that, these like animal, like these souls in these animal bodies, they're very special.
I see.
So, I saw this one picture like on Facebook of this monkey worshipping like a deity or something, or like a shrine, I don't know. But yeah, I was kind of thinking about this, that, they're locked in a human body. Sorry. Yeah. And do they love Krishna?
Yeah. They're all different, and they're all, the reason they're there is relative to their past and so forth. And some of them you'll see overt expressions of that, but we like to think of it like that. And at the same time, there's a surface to the Boma. Well, there's two things. Boma Leela is one thing. Krishna comes and he performs his Leela. The other thing is that Vrindavan is there now. Krishna's not performing his Leela out there now. There are people there, there are animals there, there are plants there, and so forth. What's their status? Well, we tend to look generously, but at the same time, we're taught that the Dham is not a physical location. It's not something that can be measured. We say it's this many miles and so forth, wide and round and so on and so forth. But those are not. That's only in the context of rasa, in the context of the Leela. So for the sake of the Leela, it's this many miles or this many feet or whatever from one place to the next, but it's all within the immeasurable. And therefore, it's a Dham aparad to think of the Dham as a geographical place, limited by geographical barriers and so forth. So the point being that even the Dham manifest on earth is really a subjective place. So to enter into the Dham on earth requires a certain consciousness. Therefore, you can go to the Dham and not be in the Dham. Also, there's said to be like a surface covering of the Dham that people enter into and appear to be in the Dham and conduct themselves in ways that seem inappropriate for someone in the Dham. And they maybe don't appear to be of good character, so to speak, of having love for Krishna, but they're not really in the Dham. They're only on the surface where Maya has made a slight covering over the Dham. So it's a consciousness, it's a subjective reality. So in that reality, yes, all the animals love Krishna. Now the ones on the surface, some of them may too. And they try to break through the surface and enter into it. And they may have to wait another life, but it comes out and shows itself. That help? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Haribol.
Okay. All right. We have a couple more minutes. Is there anything else? Did we answer all the questions, Aradhana, or are there more?
Yeah, no, you've answered all the questions.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
So you were saying that all the trees and animals, they're manifest by the Swarup Shakti. And I just had a question. I was just recently reading in the Vraj Vilastava how a lot of the trees and the creepers were sages that had taken birth in the Dham. So can you comment on that?
It's said by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his commentary on Ujjwal Nilmani that there are those that follow the inhabitants of Vrindavan with a view to attain a bhav like theirs. And that is what we call Raganuga Bhakti, and that's our practice. But there are others who also worship participants in the Leela, but from the point of view of what's called a Hangropasanam. Hangropasanam is kind of a self-worship where I identify myself with well, you can identify yourself with different figures in the Leela, but anyway, he says that those who in the context of a Hangropasanam venerate the inhabitants, take birth, dreaming and birth, and live in the Dham amongst those, with those associates. So I would probably look at that idea in terms of answering your questions.
Gurmaraj, you're breaking up and we didn't hear your last, you're frozen now. We missed, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, his screen's gone black for me.
Yeah, it's completely frozen. So he left.
Yeah, I guess I'll reconnect.
Yeah.
Hello?
There you are.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Lost you there.
Yeah, so we had.
So there may be some sages. So there may be some sages that merge with eternal associates who are appearing as trees or birds and so forth, and they have some experience of that. From it's a status in eternity. It's certainly not what desirable on our part. And then, but it doesn't mean to say that those aren't the trees, the birds, the cows aren't manifestations of the Swarup Shakti. Only the Swarup Shakti is functioning there along with Krishna. Whoever's there is under the influence of the Swarup Shakti in one form or another. So can a sage be born as a tree in Vrindavan? Yeah. But will that be one who's following Raga Bhakti? No. Is he worshipable? From the Brajbasi's point of view, everyone's worshipable. Everyone and everything. So no problem there. All right. Well, nice to talk with you all. I hope to be with you next week. Thank you for your questions and your time and your generosity. Haribol.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great.
Before everyone goes, I have some announcements. Sorry, I'm having some allergies, so I'm like a little sniffly. Okay, so the big announcement is rather than having like one link for all the classes from Monday to Saturday and then having a different one for the Swami call, it's just going to be one link now. So hopefully that makes things easier. So it's going to be a new link, right, Archana? No, not a new link. It's the same link. It's going to be the same link as the Monday through Saturday. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's a big switch. So keep that in mind. And then we'll send out reminders about that. And then also on the 25th of May, which isn't this coming Tuesday, I think it's next Tuesday. I just checked my calendar a second ago. The Gurudev's going to be giving a class for Nishringa Chaturdasi. And then just going to like announce the May classes. So on Mondays, Padmanabha Swami is giving classes on Brahmara Gita, the Song of the Bumblebee. And then on Tuesdays, Ashamara is giving classes on Sharanagati, the Path of Surrender. And then on Wednesdays, Dulal Chandra is giving classes on Krishna Sandarbha. And on Thursdays, Archana is giving classes, their interviews, and it's the beauty and messiness of a sadhaka's journey, interviews with modern day sages. And then on Fridays, Brigupad is giving classes, the philosophy and practice of Gaudiya Vaishnav lectures. And then on Saturdays, Shamananda is giving class, and it's Arjun's Yoga of Despair, the significance of Bhagavad Gita's first chapter. Okay, I think those are all the announcements. Yeah, but like I said, anyway, send out reminders and stuff. So, okay, I think that's all, right, Archana? Is that all?
Yes, and for all the classes from now on, like for Nishringadeva's appearance.
Okay, yeah, thanks.